world is changing. We're seeing a profound alteration to conditions on our planet. From all points on the compass come reports of natural disasters, epic floods, massive wildfires, drought, volcano eruptions, earthquakes, and scientists are warning that even more extreme weather is on the way. Is the world as we know it about to change forever? The ability of humans to affect the world we live in today is incredible. There have been more changes to the way people live their lives in the past 100 years than at any other time in history. While at times this ability has resulted in great success and accomplishment, we are now seeing other, much less positive effects. Human contribution to global warming is now accepted as fact. Carbon emissions and the destruction of natural forests, the lungs of the Earth, have already led to increased temperatures and severe climate change. And the rate at which plant and animal species are going extinct on Earth is nearly 1,000 times higher than normal. Nearly 52% of the world's wildlife has disappeared in the past 40 years, with many more on the endangered list. This frightening statistic has led scientists and conservationists to declare that we are in the middle of the 6th mass extinction of species. While there have been large-scale extinctions in previous times, there's now little doubt that they are mostly a direct result of human activities. Perhaps the fact that more than half of the world's population now lives in cities has something to do with it. In spite of the fact that humans enjoy many benefits from nature, our modern lifestyles have created a disconnect from the natural environment. Some researchers estimate that humans now spend up to 90% of their lives indoors.
I don't know when, how, or why, but at some point along our human journey, we forgot that we're a part of nature. We started to talk about nature as something that's separate from us. And when that split happened, we lost our connection to ourselves and to one another, because the one thing that connects us all is that we are nature.
You know, there is a saying that what we see outside is actually a reflection of what is there inside. So something in our own belief system, in our own deeper faith to nature, interconnectedness, that deeper consciousness that we are part and parcel of nature, something has splintered, and that splintering is what is manifesting in this kind of a catastrophic manifestation.
This disconnection from nature is having a negative impact on humans because we are missing out on the beneficial effects of nature. As a result, we're less connected to nature and feel less responsibility to protect the environment.
We've become, sadly, through our disconnection from the broader aspects of nature, we've become a lonely species. We are a selfish species. We are impatient as a species. We are ecologically illiterate. We have forgotten how to read the signs of the times.
While city dwellers may not always have a conscious connection with nature, there seems to be a deep longing in all of us, a sense that something is missing. Scientists call it biophilia, which is defined as the connections that human beings subconsciously seek with the rest of life. This essentially means that humans have a desire to be near nature. A few urbanized decades and technology immersion can't knock it out of us.
We've forgotten where we've come from. Okay? And we miss it. We no longer recognize ourselves in the world anymore, in places where we grew up. We've forgotten the geographies of our childhood.
We have lost the sacredness of nature. Therefore, the understanding of the stewardship of nature that we should be engaging with and then we should be allowing it to direct, is being misinterpreted. So we don't actually know what or how that stewardship is supposed to manifest in terms of our relationship to nature.
It would seem then that re-establishing a connection with nature at a global level would be critical to making changes that would benefit our ailing planet.
In order to sustain a change in behavior, you have to first awaken the deeper awareness. And so as we awaken a deeper awareness of ourselves as consciousness, as soul, as spiritual beings, we awaken the capacity within ourselves to then sustain a changed behavior, a changed attitude towards everything. And so then we begin to look at the world around us differently. We begin to become more conscious and aware that how much am I treating my world with respect? How much am I treating my world with non-violence, basically, with love and care?
We are not separate and apart from the rest of creation. We are integrally part of the web of life. We cannot exist without the rest of the web of life, and we are part of it. And we need to work with the web of life and not against it.
We are nature, and therefore, if we want to stay a species that's welcome on this planet, then it behooves us to begin to fit in and become a well-adapted species again.
Our ancestors were in awe of nature and never saw themselves as separate from it. They gave thanks for their harvests, sharing it with their community as well as the birds and animals and Mother Earth. They understood far better than modern humans that the earth is hugely generous, and their faith in the generosity of their gods was unwavering.
I think if the Buddha were alive today, he would be saying we are all interconnected and we all are mutually dependent on each other and on the environment and on this earth. And that is really the basis and the central core of the Buddha's teachings.
Now we live in a vast universe. Everything has an impact on everything else.
The way the prophets, peace be upon him, lived was a life that is embodied or embodies all the sustainability principles, all the harmony with nature. It's a lifestyle that is sustainable in every way.
Scientific studies have shown that the more time an individual spends in nature, the more connected they feel to it and the more concern they feel for nature. Just a view of trees or flowers through a window has a positive effect on the perceptions and moods of children. And over long periods, people working in rooms with similar views have fewer illnesses, feel less frustrated and more patient, and express greater enthusiasm for work. People who spend more time in nature show signs of improved psychological and social well-being, as well as mindfulness, increased self-awareness, self-esteem, and resilience. It's a process of healing.
Healing involves a reconnecting. It's a reconnecting with that which is deepest in us. It's a reconnecting and honoring of that which is deeply intuitive in us.
There is now little doubt that human activities have contributed to the current state of the world, and that all living beings will have to face up to the consequences. But there are signs of hope. Governments and other people in power are finally starting to take the climate change crisis seriously. And perhaps most exciting of all, new sciences are rediscovering ancient wisdom that could make a huge difference in the way we live our lives in the future. But some have not been welcomed and have even caused great concern and fear. The debate over advanced genetic engineering over the past few decades has been fierce, and in 2010 there was a public outcry when biologist and billionaire entrepreneur Craig Fenter built a synthetic cell from scratch. While some hailed the new life form as an important scientific breakthrough, others have accused him of playing God and tampering with the essence of life. Is it fundamentally wrong for us to change what God created in an attempt to make it better? Are these scientists suggesting that human beings share with God some responsibility for the ongoing creativity of our world? In the Bible, Proverbs 16 verse 18, we read that pride goes before destruction. Could it be that in our modern era, pride among some natural scientists has taken the form of overestimating our knowledge, or perhaps confusing the knowledge we do have with the wisdom to decide how to use it?
Somewhere along the line, we get too big to understand nature. And then we get into our own head and we get into our own little journeys, the human journeys, which become far too larger than nature herself, and then we lose the plot.
But one new science that is rapidly gaining popularity amongst manufacturers, architects, town planners, and a variety of other disciplines is that of biomimicry.
So a lot of good things have happened in the last 50 years, along with the bad things, of course. The good things is that we have begun to understand the deeper mechanics of how nature operates. There are some basic techniques that we can learn. And new sciences have evolved out of that, such as biomimicry, which is really learning how nature works at its basic fundamental level.
So biomimicry is the conscious emulation of nature's genius. It's a way of looking at the biological intelligence of the last 3.8 billion years of evolution and drawing from that design principles that we as a species can learn to fit in sustainably on this planet.
Biomimicry literally translates from the Greek as imitation of life. It is the idea that problems can be solved and humans greatly benefited by simulating or copying the processes found in biology, chemistry, and geology.
So it acknowledges firstly that we're part of nature and that humans are not separate from nature. There is no difference. We're just one species within nature.
So you're shifting your perspective of I'm going into nature to learn about it. That's that tree, it's called this, and that's to what is that tree doing? What do I need to do? How similar are those doing things, and can I learn from this?
While the term biomimicry is relatively new, our ancestors have been looking for answers in nature for thousands of years. About 2/3 of our medicines are derived from plant materials. Ethnobotany is a recognized area of research and uses the knowledge of various cultures that has been acquired over the centuries. Biomimicry takes this concept of using the natural resources found in nature one step further. It's more about studying the way nature does things and then trying to find ways that we can copy it.
We as humans need to be able to mimic what nature has already taught us. It is perfect. It is abundant. It is able to adapt to any kind of context that's around it. It is infinitely creative, and everything gets what it needs out of it without any waste in the process.
This understanding of biomimicry, I think, is really important, because if we recognize that we're part of nature, that we've evolved within the evolution of nature, we need to follow the same rules of nature, then we must live in harmony with nature. And so if we see how nature functions and operates and follow that and mimic that, I believe it will open huge opportunities for our own sustainable future.
Since 2002, Biomimicry 3.8, a global leader in biomimicry innovation, has been running week-long immersion workshops to introduce participants to a new way of viewing and valuing the genius that surrounds us in the natural world.
So in this particular workshop, we've got a wide diversity of backgrounds. We've got a mechanical engineer who's been practicing for over 30 years. We have a young architect that's just getting started. We've got people with brand strategy backgrounds. We have industrial designers. We have, I mean, I can't even keep track of all of the different disciplines, but it's been fascinating to watch these people that come from all over the world. And no matter what their cultural background is, they find a connection and realize there's something to learn from nature.
This workshop was developed together with Biomimicry South Africa. The program focused on honing and developing the skills to tap into nature's genius while inspiring new innovations. Designers, innovators and thought leaders from around the world are inspired to discover biological intelligence and bring it into their work.
So when we go on an immersive experience, it's critically important that we have the opportunity to introduce people to nature's incredible forms, her processes, her systems, and to bring them out to experience in real time what's happening in these scenarios. And the beauty of taking people in the field, it gives us the opportunity to connect with large examples, whether it's the rhino or the giraffe. And by walking in the field and showing these to people in real time, that becomes a very tangible message and a lesson about feedback loops, about cooperation, about communication, about how signals and antenna and response work. And then that sets in deep within their understanding of how nature works. And those are the lessons that people take home.
The immersion workshop took place high up in the Soutpansberg Mountains, deep in the heart of the South African bushveld. This is one of the country's most unique environments and has one of the highest biodiversities in the country. It forms part of the recently proclaimed Vhembe Biosphere Reserve and has been declared a UNESCO Natural Heritage Site. The vegetation ranges from bushveld to large patches of montane forest with several endemic species. And with a checklist of over 360 tree species and hundreds of bird species, small animals, reptiles and insects, the reserve offers excellent opportunities for aspiring biomimics.
So one of the most profound things that happens on these immersion workshops is the oftentimes complete transformation that people have in the way that they view the natural world. They go home with ahas and a perspective on who they are and their role in their place on this planet and what it means to be a human here today. And that probably more than anything is the real value that people take home, and it never leaves them.
But if you ever get bored of looking around the bush and seeing no big animals, look around you, there'll always be a bird to see no matter where you are, even in the middle of a city.
Once I started reading and learning more about the concept of biomimicry, I started recognizing that we can't simply keep thinking about humans alone. I mean, what it does is it helps you recognize your place in the universe. It helps you recognize that you're not the predatory apex species on the planet. You're one in a network of species. And that is humbling. It also reorganizes what design means to you, and it creates a new framework. And I think that is what was very critical for me in learning about biomimicry and reorganizing what I thought of as design, and helped me to go from human-centered to life-centered design.
It resonates deeply within me, and practicing biomimicry is something that I feel aligns with almost how I want to live my life, and how I believe. It's aligned with my faith, it's aligned with my principles, morals. And I think a lot of biomimics might say this as well, but it's just natural. It's my calling, I would say.
amount of information that God has placed at our disposal in nature is mind-boggling, and there is little doubt that we will never fully understand it. God placed all these patterns, designs, and solutions into creation at the beginning of time, when people did not yet need them. It would be a very long time before we would begin to comprehend their value and copy them to solve human-created problems. But Dr. Dana Baumeister says that before we can copy them, we need to have a good understanding of the basic principles of nature's design.
So as we turn to nature for advice and ask questions about how to live here well on this planet, it probably should occur to us that there's some deep patterns that are true of all species that have lived on this planet. And we call those deep patterns life's principles. They are the guidelines for living well. And we know that's true because all of the species follow them. And if all of the species follow these guidelines, and that's what's allowed them to survive and thrive so well on this planet, then it would make sense for us as a species to learn about those guidelines and try to follow them ourselves. So, for example, we know that all of life is locally attuned. It pays attention to the place where it lives and fits in and learns to respond to those conditions that are in those places. We also know that life integrates development with growth. It doesn't invest all of its energy into just growing bigger, and then it falls over because that's all it's done, but it balances the development of the infrastructure, the support for that growth over time. We also know that life uses multifunctional design. It has single strategies that meet many, many functional needs. So take a leaf, for example. A leaf we think of as, of course, needing to gather energy from the sun, and it photosynthesizes in order to produce sugars, but that's not all a leaf has to do. A leaf has to manage water balance, it has to protect itself from predators, it has to manage the temperature, figure out if it's going to leaf out when it's wet or when it's warm, and all of those factors are solved with a single solution within a leaf.
If you looked at the veins of the leaf, you would see they're all distributed in a brilliant network, that if a caterpillar eats that part, you can still get nutrients and water flow, all the way around the leaf.
But a leaf doesn't exist in itself. It's on a branch, it's on a tree, and that tree is part of a larger ecosystem.
Everything about that tree is designed that change might happen. You don't know where it's coming from, you don't know when it's coming. It could happen in any time, so you just got to be prepared for that.
Sometimes the greatest lessons can come from the smallest of creatures.
So if we look at a spider, for example, and we look at its silk, we might think that it's just a random thread and a web that's in the forest. But if you look at silk up close, we learn that it has some incredibly remarkable properties. In fact, if you take a strand of silk and pack it as thick as your finger, it's strong enough to stop an airplane landing on an aircraft carrier. And ounce for ounce, it's stronger than steel. But yet, spider silk is made from chopped up fly parts, last night's dinner. And in using benign chemistry in the abdomen of the spider itself, it cooks up this incredible web that is, nothing that we've ever been able to replicate. Our closest equivalent is Kevlar, and the process of making Kevlar involves high temperatures, high pressures, and nasty chemistry. Imagine if we could relearn how to make our fibers by learning from the spider and following that chemistry that nature uses.
One of the smallest and yet least understood of all nature's creatures are ants. Often seen by humans as a nuisance when they invade our kitchens, ants have what is perhaps one of the most advanced civilizations on the planet. There is no such thing as personal gain or selfishness in the ant world. Everything they do is for the good of the community. And they offer perhaps the greatest argument against critics, which blame human overpopulation as the major cause of the crisis facing the Earth.
If you took the weight of all the ants in this world, they would weigh more than the weight of all humans in the world. Now, this is startling. It's startling, it's exciting, it's interesting, and it gives you pause. It makes you recognize and realize there are a ton of other species that we can learn from.
Ants are millions of years old as a species. They have been industrious. They're really industrious species. And yet, everything that they do nourishes the place in which they live. We've been industrious for a few centuries and we brought about a destruction and everything. We have to change the way we do things and stop arguing that it's the numbers that are the problem. It's the way we design, the way we make. That is actually, for me, the critical problem.
So what biomimicry does is it takes us outside this concept of anthropocentric design. It helps us recognize that we could learn from all these other species, and it, in a sense, guides us from a very human-centered approach to design to a very life-centered approach to design.
One of the least explored areas of the world are the oceans, and this is where some of the most exciting discoveries are certain to be made. One that offers great potential is the abalone, known in South Africa as the perlemoen.
So the abalone, if we look at the shell of an abalone, it grows on the top, and it is a ceramic that is stronger than any ceramic that we as a species have ever made. And the beauty of the abalone ceramic is it's made in ambient temperatures. It's made in the ocean at approximately, 2 to 5 degrees Celsius, at the surface of the abalone's tissue, right in or near its own body. Can you imagine living in a ceramic furnace and being able to tolerate the heat, beat, and treat temperatures that we use to manufacture our ceramics today? It is like chalk. It uses a calcium carbonate that is what chalk is, super, super soft. But it assembles it in a brick-like fashion with overlapping bricks with a protein mortar in between, kind of like bricks with jam in between. But that brick layer gives it incredible strength. And so if there's a crack, that crack does not travel through, doesn't propagate, and it's incredibly strong, all done at ambient temperatures. And the beauty of learning from the natural world and something like the abalone is that we can then take those lessons. In fact, there's a group that has learned how to assemble those bricks in a process that only uses UV light and is making transparent glass that is virtually unbreakable without ever having to put it in a furnace.
The natural world holds a treasure chest of secrets waiting to be discovered by scientists, such as biomimics. Sometimes the discovery of these secrets is waiting for the right combination of human genius, the right tools, and new ways of thinking to discover them. But there are some technologies that have been developed from biomimicry principles that are already making a huge difference in our lives. The loudspeakers in phones were inspired by human eardrums. Velcro was developed by scientists studying cockleburs. And bird-inspired airplanes are innovations so ubiquitous in our lives, we scarcely think about their origin. In the 1990s, scientists were able to discover and duplicate what is called the lotus effect. Lotus flowers and other plants growing in dusty areas remain amazingly clean. The reason for their cleanliness is that the leaves are covered by tiny bumps and a waxy coating. The surface tension of the water droplets allows the water to ride across the tops of the bumps and the dirt is washed away. Scientists have learnt from this and are today producing environmentally friendly paints that do the same thing. More recent examples of biomimicry include new ways to manufacture concrete developed from studying coral reefs, highly efficient wind turbines modelled on the shape of whale flippers, and entirely new approaches of creating colour inspired by butterflies. Perhaps the largest and most impressive biomimetically inspired development in the world is the Eden Project.
The Eden Project in Cornwall in England was designed by a group called Grimshaw Architects, and one of the lead architects on that project was Michael PAWLYN. Michael PAWLYN's a biomimetic architect. He takes nature as his base for how to build and design in the world. And with that, they look to natural form systems processes to inspire the structures.
The complex is dominated by two huge enclosures consisting of adjoining domes that house thousands of plant species, and each enclosure emulates a natural biome. The biomes consist of hundreds of hexagonal and pentagonal inflated plastic cells supported by steel frames. The largest of the two biomes simulates a rainforest environment and the second a Mediterranean environment.
The kind of organisms that we looked at for the Eden Project were things like pollen grains, radiolaria, and before that, the basic move that generated the form of the building, that was actually inspired by soap bubbles. And then as we moved through the process, we looked at other examples from nature. So for instance, in nature, there are lots of examples of very efficient structures based on pressurized membranes, plant cells and so on. And it was partly that led us to develop and really push the technology of the ETFE pillows. You put it together in these three layers which you seal around the edge and then you inflate. So it's a super lightweight structure. It's about 1% of the weight of double glazing.
The structure is completely self-supporting and takes the form of geodesic domes, which are extremely strong for their weight. Made up by a series of interlocking hexagons and pentagons, the surface provides an inherently stable structure and encloses the greatest volume for the least surface area. Because of the lightness of the material, less steel was used for reinforcement, which means more light can enter the space and less energy is required to heat the space in winter. In fact, the structure itself weighs less than the air it contains. The copper roof design of this building is derived from phyllotaxis, which is the mathematical basis for nearly all plant growth. The opposing spirals found in many plants, such as the seeds in a sunflower's head, pine cones, and pineapples.
So it's just an incredible example of how nature not only creates a whole new type of aesthetic that's quite unique, but can also be incredibly economically viable and save you a lot of money at the same time.
The Eden Project is just one of many examples of biomimicry and how man can learn to be efficient by mimicking what is already happening in nature. By being aware of how nature solves problems, we can improve our everyday lives.
The beauty of biomimicry is that it's relevant to all of us, right? It crosses all disciplines, all boundaries, all geographic perceptions of who we are on this planet. And in fact, in order to practice biomimicry, we need everybody at the table. We do find that our audiences are primarily biologists, designers, engineers, communication specialists, business strategists. And the beauty of having those types of people in a learning community together is that you can draw on each other's expertise and understanding of how the human design world works and how the biological world works, and bring all of those pieces together to ultimately design the solutions that we need.
For those who know where to look, biomimetically inspired products and processes can be found in almost every corner of the marketplace. But where the emerging field has the potential for the greatest impacts, according to advocates and practitioners, is in changing the way we think about our man-made environment, not only in designing individual products, but in conceiving of entire communities as biomimetic systems. Biomimicry scientist Shannon ROYDEN-TURNER has been working closely with the local community in Langrach near Franschhoek in the Western Cape to find solutions for the management of stormwater, wastewater and solid waste.
So at the moment, it's a massive problem because the water that is just soaking into the ground everywhere around where people are living is highly toxic water, actually, because people are so amazing in the way that they use water. They recycle it and recycle it and recycle it. The problem is it's very dirty when they throw it away.
Informal settlements tend to develop organically. People put up houses wherever they can with little thought about how storm or wastewater will be managed. When municipalities eventually take over and want to supply services, they try to straighten it all out and organize it into 90-degree blocks as they've been doing in the more formal areas.
What we looked at in Langrach was, can we work with the form that already exists and look at how flow systems already move through. So where is water already moving through? Because it's already figured it out. There's already an intelligence there that we try to work with. So our system doesn't look at moving anybody around. It's how can we service as quickly as possible with creating as little disturbance as possible. So the water follows the flow patterns that have already been established in Langrach, and we're just formalizing those.
With the flow patterns of the water figured out, the next step was to find ways to clean it up. Apart from posing a health risk to local residents, the toxic state of the wastewater was causing a serious pollution problem in the river running through the valley below Langrach.
So we wanted to look at how could nature take that waste and turn it into value. Could we put plants, like wetland plants, and use them in a way that actually sees that as a nutrient? Plus slow down the stormwater, produce an opportunity to clean that water and prevent the pollution of the river down below.
And we've been working with a partner company in the States called John Todd Ecological Engineers. And they've just been the most amazing company to work with, because he really has understood the complexity of an ecosystem and how we can use that to treat water.
What's extraordinary about that is while it's doing that, eating nutrients as the water flows, it's actually sequestering carbon, producing oxygen, greening the space, and the potential to grow things like arum lilies that cut flowers, or taking some of those things and turning them into nurseries or to compost, and contributing to the well-being of the people, not only through healthy, clean water, but through potential income generation.
Claire says that just as all living things in nature have learned to communicate and share resources, so too humans need to listen to what nature and their fellow humans have to say. To encourage today's young students from all disciplines to work together, BIOMIMICRY Global started a program called the BIOMIMICRY Design Challenge, an annual competition open to students and professionals who are invited to use biomimicry principles to come up with answers to a particular environmental problem.
The challenge involved Cape Town University of Technology and Stellenbosch University, and we brought together about 50-60 students from all different disciplines. So we had biologists, we had engineers, we had designers, we had scientists. Students that would never normally have any interaction with one another are now all working together to try and solve a specific challenge.
Last year, the theme was water. The project partnered with a German engineering and robotics company, and they provided the teams with a technology that helps capture water from air. The students' brief was to learn about biomimicry and then take that technology and integrate it into their designs.
The designs needed to be context specific, so they were looking at specific challenges pertaining to South Africa and Africa around water. And they worked in these extraordinary multidisciplinary teams, and they came up with incredible designs.
Biomimicry South Africa believes it is essential for all engineering, architectural and material science students to have an understanding of biomimicry.
So the Student Design Challenge creates a collaborative space where all of these different disciplines can come together and they can create real robust solutions that they wouldn't be able to do in isolation.
When God designed the world, He made sure that natural systems produce no waste. One organism's waste is another organism's food. Imagine how different the world would be if we could unlock the secrets of God's designs so that any waste we produced became food for something else. How much more sustainable would our lives be? How much better would we be at managing our impact on creation?
The beauty about the times that we live in is that we are also continuously learning from our mistakes. We are learning the pitfalls that are there, and we are evolving with nature also. Our wisdom is evolving.
Biomimicry is really a practice that transcends the traditional boundaries that we put up between ourselves, whether it's boundaries of discipline or boundaries of culture, boundaries of religion. And biomimicry allows us to have a conversation about what it means to be a human on this planet.
So when we look at nature, we just also realize the more you look at it, there's so much complexity to it. You start to wonder what is actually behind all of this complexity. You know, what structures all of this amazing intelligence? And so the more you start to look into nature, the more you realize that there must be some grand intelligence behind this all.
For me, it's definitely worth copying. But whatever you look at, whether it's a single thing, the most exquisite butterfly you've ever seen, and the way that it generates its color is so genius, and whether it was designed by God or whether it evolved over time to adapt to its space, my thinking is it's genius. It's doing something in a way that creates a color that is brilliant, but it also contributes to life. We need to learn how to do that. Let's copy it wherever it comes from.
My personal opinion on biomimicry from the Islamic point of view is that biomimicry embodies a very deep-rooted principle in Islam. The idea is that we've been in the Quran, alluded to look at nature and marvel at its greatness, at its beauty, at the design. And the connection there is just, it's primal, it's almost instinctual and natural.
In the Judeo-Christian tradition, Adam and Eve were given dominion over all animals and plants in the Garden of Eden and charged with the responsibility as representatives of the human race to take care of God's creation. In Judaism, the Torah is filled with rich language which describes and glorifies nature. These passages specifically imply that all beings, not just humans, are part of creation and so should be treated with respect. Hindus are subject to a higher and more authoritative responsibility for creation. The most important aspect of this is the doctrine of ahimsa or non-violence, and that all living things are connected. Islamic ecological ethics are derived from the belief that all of creation comes from God and not from man, and that animals and plants have as much right to exist on the earth as humans. And according to Buddhist teaching, there is a very close interdependence between the natural environment and the sentient beings living in it. All the major faiths agree that the earth is the common heritage of all living creatures and is also the ultimate source of life. By overexploiting its resources, we are undermining the very basis of our own life. The protection and conservation of the earth is not a question of morality or ethics, but a question of our very survival. Next week, we meet a few remarkable individuals who will share with us some of the amazing life lessons they have learned from nature.